Hello there, this is Rhoda with the National Museum of Racing and Hall of Fame. Thank you for joining me again for Collections Connections for Kids. Now, as you can tell, I am not in the museum today. I am standing here in the Isaac Murphy Memorial Art Garden in Lexington, Kentucky, on the corner of East 3rd and Nelson Avenue. Now this garden and this public space is dedicated to the memory and legacy of Isaac Burns Murphy. And if you remember, the last time we were together on Collections Connections for Kids, we learned a bit about Murphy's life and his contributions to the sport. Today, we're going to learn a little more from our friend, Bruce Mundy. Let's go meet Bruce. Good morning, Mr. Mundy, and thank you for sharing your time with us this morning. Can you talk some about the significance of this part of Lexington, Kentucky, and Isaac Murphy's life?
Well, there's a lot of significance to the east end of Lexington in that at one time it was the preeminent horse racing component or capital of the world. The old Kentucky Association racetrack was built in what used to be Bluegrass Aspendale housing project was built up in that area. Isaac Murphy actually lived right here on this spot that we're on today. And most of African Americans who worked in the horse industry lived somewhere close to this area, not necessarily in the East End, but there were many people who did live in the East End of Lexington.
And we are sitting in the Isaac Murphy Memorial Art Garden today. Could you share some background on the Memorial Art Garden? How did it come about?
Well, it's interesting that you're doing a program for children, because the garden actually came about because of a program for children. We were actually doing gardens, vegetable gardens, fruit gardens, and we'll name them after historical African American figures. One of the first gardens we did was Mary Britton Garden. And Mary Britton was an African American who was born during the time of enslavement, but she was born a free black. Became a teacher and realized that black people, if they got sick, couldn't go to hospitals. And so she went back to school and she became a doctor and bought a house on Limestone, and she turned it into a hospital, infirmary for black people. So we named the garden after her, and we ended up losing that particular land for that garden. And the next garden we was going to do was going to name Isaac Murphy Garden. And Leadership Lexington came and wanted to do a project with myself and Jim Embry, and it turned out to be what you see behind us, Isaac Murphy Memorial Arts Garden, because we were doing gardens. And so, and we were doing gardens with children, young people. And so here we have this place that's a garden, but it's not a fruit and vegetable garden, but it's a garden of history, it's a garden of art. And so, yeah, that's kind of like the journey.
Well, thank you. And you had mentioned this just a bit ago, but we are very close to the location of what was once Lexington's racetrack for a long time, the Kentucky Association racetrack. Can you give us some information about that track and its history?
Kentucky Association racetrack was in the east end of Lexington for a very long time, until 1933, in which it closed. It actually closed twice. I think it closed in 1900 and they reopened it, closed in the late 1800s and they reopened it, and then eventually it closed again. Opened in 1826, and so very old history to the racetrack. Many of the really important African American jockeys at the time rode at that track. James Hugh Perkins was considered a boy wonder jockey and raced at that track, and they had a race meet where they had, I think, was 25 races. Of the 25 races, he finished first in 15, second in 4, and third in 3. He won almost every race that they did, and they called him the boy wonder jockey. He ended up winning the Kentucky Derby, tied to be one of the youngest jockeys at 15 to win the Kentucky Derby in 1895 on a horse called Hummel. And what else can I say about the Kentucky Association racetrack? My first cousin, who just recently turned 100 years old, we honored him probably about 4 or 5 years ago as being the oldest known living person to have worked around the racetrack. He actually worked around the racetrack when he was a young boy. My grandfather found out that he was up working around the track, and he stopped him. But he said that he still continued to work. He would wipe the dust off the windows of the cars, and they would give him 10 cents when my grandfather stopped him working around the track. Older folks back then thought the tracks were not a place for young people. And so, but he just recently turned 100 years old.
I remember it was 4 or 5 years ago right here in the art garden that you had that celebration honoring him. Isn't that right?
That's right. That's right.
I was here for that. It was a wonderful day.
Yes.
And I've got one last question for you. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us about Isaac Murphy or his influence as a jockey?
Well, you know, we talk about Isaac Murphy having won 3 Kentucky Derbies and having a 44% winning record, although Isaac said it was more than that. We talk about that, but what we don't talk about Isaac is that he was a human, a person, and a very giving person too. He was in Elks, and during that period of time, the Elks were philanthropist organizations. They did things to help people, okay? And so Isaac's purpose was, while he became quite wealthy, was to help other people who maybe didn't have the type of life he was having and stuff. And so one newspaper article talks about a young lady who, I think at the time of this newspaper article, she was probably in her 70s. But she remembered coming to this spot. This is where they had Isaac Murphy's visitation. Her parents brought her to the spot as a child, and what she said in the newspaper article was, Isaac Murphy was kind to people like them. And that meant that they were poor. They were poor people, that he was kind to poor people. So more than just a jockey, which we talk about the great jockey Isaac Murphy was, and he was a great jockey. More than just a great jockey, Isaac Murphy was a great human.
I'm so happy you shared that with us, because the last time we were together on this program, the kids got to hear a lot about Isaac Murphy's life, but from the perspective of his record and his riding and his athleticism. So for you to shed light on his humanity is really special. So
well, Isaac used to have really huge, he's a socialite, but he used to have really huge parties on these grounds, and everybody was invited to the parties. He used to have bands here, so we now do the From the Front Porch Jazz series here, because we literally playing off his front porch, right? And so, but he used to invite everybody in the community to come to these social gatherings that he had. So he was a philanthropist, and he, in many ways, said that, you know, that people will remember him for his record on the track, but it was really about his humaneness, okay, or his humanness that will stand out, that really will be remembered. That the record is fine and the horse riding was fine, but it was really about him being a good person.
Well, what an honor to have this here, like you said, where he lived and where he spent much of his time, on the track and off the track. Just a great memorial for this community. And thank you all so much for your hard work to get it here and to maintain it.
Sante Sana. In Swahili, that means thank you very much.
And thank you for sharing your time with us again this morning.
Sante.
Goodbye, Mr. Mundy.
Bye-bye.